Exciting. My experiment road was growing every year. You may know that grow tomatoes 4, 5, 6 years. But if you grow No. And I'm going to expect I've got to get over there maybe mid to late April. But I think it's called the wine cap. It's a different mushroom. I've been giving you the cocky, and I think I gave you some of my cocky that was for a while in our yard.
Good morning. My name is Mark Weber, and I would like to welcome you to our Sabbath service at the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Cleveland. We're glad that you're here today with us, and we especially want to welcome guests who are joining us for the first time, either here in the sanctuary or at home via Zoom. If you are interested in who we are and what we believe, we invite you to fill out one of the guest cards located in the pew rack in front of you. And then you can place that card in the offering plate when it comes around later in the service. If you are watching from an internet platform, you can go to us at our website, uucleveland.org. Just a couple more announcements, housekeeping details, really. First, on the back of your order of service is a QR code. It will take you to our contract tracing form. Please take a moment before you leave today to fill out the form. It's so simple that really even I could do it. And second of all, just a reminder, gentle reminder, we're now in a sacred space. And so if you could please silence your cell phones or any other electronic device that goes beep. And now we have two distinguished congregants who are going to make announcements. The first is Lori Albright.
Good morning, UUCC. Good morning. Members of our GCC, that is Greater Cleveland Congregations Core Team, are inviting you to support democracy at GCC's upcoming action. This Zoom action, entitled Ballot for Democracy for a More Perfect Union, is scheduled for Thursday, April 7th, from 7 to 8:30 p.m. During for the offices of Cuyahoga County Executive and Juvenile Court Judge about their willingness to support issues GCC has determined important to our community. This is an opportunity for you to act in concert with the proposed 8th principle, which calls on us to dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. Please join us. Members of the GCC core team will be available to talk with you at our next in our fellowship hall after the service today and next Sunday as well. You may also contact Lori Albright, Bev Austin, Pat Dillard, Pam Gibbon, Vern Sackman, or Mark Weber by email or phone regarding this. Our contact information for all GCC core team members is available in our directory, which we hope you all received in the stewardship drive. Speaking of stewardship,
Cat White.
Money, if you'll pardon the expression, is like manure. It's not worth a thing unless it's spread around, encouraging young things to grow. That line was written by Thornton Wilder in his play The Matchmaker, which was turned into the musical Hello, Dolly. I was in the chorus twice, and believe it or not, I directed a high school production. One of the many unusual, Tom Bacon and I joined the UUCC Ancestral Congregation First Unitarian in 2008. You've almost never seen him at Sunday services because between September and April, he is working with the Coming of Age program. I start my Sunday mornings with stewardship team at 9 a.m. on Zoom, which is ironic because I was dreadful at everything related to stewardship when I joined the board in 2014. They can tell you that. The more I volunteered with UUCC, the more important giving became to me, and that includes my time and money. In December, when my mom died, I received a lot of love and support from the people in the congregation, and I'm really grateful. I didn't practice that part. My mom lived by herself, and she didn't get involved with many people. She spent a lot of time putting together puzzles, a lot of them. The one I knew I wanted to bring home is this one. the riveter hung on her dining room door next to the table where she did all the puzzles. And the whole "we can do it" speaks so much to me of my life and my family, and being a member of this congregation. We is all of us in the room. It's also everybody who came before us, whose work we carry on, and it's everybody who's new or young and who will carry on our work. Can is a great word. It's a vessel, it's an affirmation of ability, a statement of possibility, and it's a form of commitment. Do is all about the action. My mom sometimes told me that I was doing too much here and I needed to take a break. And there were times on the board when I kind of thought she was right. But I made a commitment, and I really valued the work that I was doing and the community and the relationships. And you know, some of what we do takes place here, and some of what we do takes place elsewhere, and we come here for respite and rejuvenation. What's it? That's all of the ways that we come together for community, grow spiritually, and seek justice. We've actually gotten better at this over the years. Now we're much more open to people saying, why don't we? And making things happen. We're forming new groups and finding new ways of doing things. When it comes to supporting our beloved community with our time and money, we can do it. When I first joined the board, they were rolling out a way to involve people, where's Lori? Called Growth Through Service. I had to do a lot of growing before I realized what that meant, and that it applied to me and my experience. So that brings me back to manure. My growth is evidence to me that Thornton Wilder, or Dolly Levi, was right. I spread some money and time around so that UUCC and all of you can grow. You do the same. And our beloved community grows. We can do it. Thank you for that.
I wanted to make one final announcement. This morning before the service began, I accidentally threw away the minister's notes on his sermon and many other valuable pieces of paper. I don't know how we'll manage this morning, but I am expecting a text reassigning me to the snow shoveling. And now if we'll read together the words for the lighting of our chalice, and they are on the yellow card in the seat back in front of you. Let's read together. Love is the spirit of this congregation, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
It takes you more than that, Mark. J. Abernathy Jr. wrote, "We affirm that love is our greatest purpose. Accepting one another is the truest form of faithful living. The search for truth is our constant star. We pledge our hearts, minds, and hands to challenge injustice with courage, to find hope in times of fear, and to live out our Unitarian Universalist values every day as a beloved community. Thus do we covenant with each other and with all that is sacred in life. We're going to take a moment to welcome one another, but first I want to prepare you for our opening hymn. And if you would repeat after me, Thula, Klizeo, Thula, Klizeo. You've sung this before, haven't you? Nala, Pasekaya. Nala Pasekaya. Thula, Klizeo, Nala Pasekaya. You're going to be amazing at this song. We're going to have to sing it a lot. It's a song that means, be still my heart, even here I am at home. So please welcome one another into this mutual home for a few moments before we sing.
Thula, Klizeo, Nala Pasekaya. Thula, Klizeo, Nala Pasekaya. Hey, Nala Pasekaya. Hey, Nala Pasekaya. Thula, Klizeo, Nala Pasekaya. All together. Thula, Klizeo, Nala Pasekaya. Hey, Kaya, Nala Pasekaya. Hey, Kaya, Nala Pasekaya. All together. Thula, Klizeo, Nala Pasekaya. Thula, Klizeo, Nala Pasekaya. Hey, Kaya, Nala Pasekaya. Hey, Kaya, Nala Pasekaya. Thula, Klizeo, Nala Pasekaya. Thula, Klizeo, Nala Pasekaya. Hey, Kaya, Nala Pasekaya. Hey, Kaya, Nala Pasekaya. Thula, Klizeo, Nala Pasekaya. Thula, Klizeo, Nala Pasekaya. Hey, Kaya, Nala Pasekaya. Hey, Kaya, Nala Pasekaya. Thula, Klizeo, Nala Pasekaya. Thula, Klizeo, Nala Pasekaya. Hey, Kaya, Nala Pasekaya. Hey, Kaya, Nala Pasekaya. All together. Thula, Klizeo, Nala Pasekaya. Thula, Klizeo, Nala Pasekaya. Hey, Kaya, Nala Pasekaya. Hey, Kaya, Nala Pasekaya. Please be seated. Well done.
Come to the time in our service where we share our joys and concerns with one another. And I'll remind you that our book now is living up here on Sunday morning. So as you enter, if you have joys or concerns that you know you want to share with the whole community, you can note them in the book. I do want to share with you that Roger Furmeyer died peacefully last Sunday. We grieve his passing and celebrate his creative legacy with his daughter Gwen. His celebration of life will be on Saturday, April 2nd at 2 p.m. There'll be more information about that in this upcoming newsletter. Roger Furmeyer. Leon and Pam would also like to share the passing of Leon's brother, Paul, this past Thursday. We offer continued prayers for the people of Ukraine, for safety, shelter, and peace. I invite you to come forward and place a stone in the water for other joys or concerns that you want to acknowledge this morning as Michael shares music with us. I didn't remember to prompt you today if you're watching online, but I'm grateful that you know now to put your joys or concerns in the comments. You can continue to do so if there are things you want to share with our community. You place a stone for those joys or concerns shared online. And another stone for those joys or concerns that we aren't publicly acknowledging just yet, but are holding in our hearts.
The reading that I should say we, are going to do this morning is We Bear Witness by Amy Brooks. This Sunday, we remember transgender, genderqueer, and non-binary people who have lost their lives due to violence, both in the United States and around the world. Now, with your permission, here's what I'd like to ask you to do. I will read each of the stanzas, and at the end, it says, "We bear witness," and it repeats that throughout. So I thought, well, why don't we just have the congregation as a whole say, "We bear witness," and let's see how that goes. So, We Bear Witness by Amy Brooks. We people gathered here today on the quest for truth and meaning. We bear witness to the record of human lives extinguished simply because these people dared to live authentically. We bear witness to the lives and reported deaths of 375 transgender people globally in 2021. We bear witness to the lives and reported deaths of 53 transgender people in the United States in 2021. We bear witness to the unreported ones, the uncounted ones, the unnamed many whose lives and deaths will ever only be known by the universe. We bear witness. In these times of heightened anxiety, we who are gathered here today reject the teachings of division and ignorance, and we commit to siding with love against hatred. We bear witness against closed-minded ideologies that excuse evil acts in the name of religion. We bear witness against any administration that seeks to fuel their rise to power by threatening the lives of transgender, genderqueer, and non-binary people. We bear witness against systemic power structures that treat transgender, genderqueer, and non-binary people, particularly those who are people of color, as being anything less than human. We bear witness. On this day, we who are queer folk and allies gathered together, we uphold the first principle that speaks to the inherent worth and dignity of every person. We bear witness. For those transgender, genderqueer, and non-binary people who are gathered among us today, we bear witness. For those who are allied to the cause of protecting our transgender, genderqueer, and non-binary siblings, we bear witness. For those who exist boldly, unapologetically in public spaces as fully authentic transgender, genderqueer, and non-binary people, we bear witness. Now I will read the names of the 53 transgender people who died by violence in 2021. Tiana Devereaux Alexander, Bianca Banks, Dominique Jackson, 50 Bands, Alexis Braxton, also known as Kimmy Icon Braxton, China Carrillo, Jasmine Jazzy Bright, Jeffrey JJ Bright, Jenna Franks, Diamond Kyrie Sanders, also known as Diamond Nicole, Rihanna Pardo, Chris Brandon Ruiz, Haida Peterson, Dominique Luscious, Remy Fennell, Tiara Banks, Iris Santos, Natalia Lopez, Tiffany Thomas, Carrie Bobo Washington, Thomas Harden, Yahaira de Alto Valenciaga, Whispering Wind Bear Spirit, Danny Henson, Sophie Vasquez, Serenity Hollis, Oliver Ollie Taylor, Poe Black, also known as Oliver Jackson, Casey Wilson, Tierra Marie Lewis, Nova Lou Watson, also known as E.J. Boykin, Ruby Dominguez, Taya Ashton, Shai Vanderpump, Coco Chanel Wortham, Poe Johnson, Zuela Rose Martinez, Desaya Moani Smith, Brianna Ulmer, also known as Brianna Hamilton, and Pierre Lacrie Cartier. These remembered deaths have not gone unnoticed by us. We bear witness. Sacred, transgender, genderqueer, and non-binary lives do not go unnoticed by us. We bear witness. For all of these and the 375 who have been murdered globally, wherever they go, we too shall go, for we are a part of them. They are a part of us, and we remember them.
Please join me in singing number 323, Break Not the Circle. Break not the circle.
I'm grateful that our worship team recognized that if we're going to celebrate Transgender Day of Visibility, we should also acknowledge Transgender Day of Remembrance, which we were dealing with other things this fall. We didn't really take time to speak those names. But Transgender Day of Visibility is about the people around us, those who are living that we want to lift up. And one of the ways that we lift people up is with sugar. We celebrate people with sugar, and so I have Dum Dum lollipops. You may remember these. Dum Dum lollipops come in every flavor, and I have all the flavors of Dum Dum lollipops with me today. You can't have them in the sanctuary. You have to have them at home, but you can celebrate all day long. And so you can savor this at a later time. So I have all the flavors of Dum Dum lollipops. I have blue raspberry and watermelon. All of the flavors that exist of Dum Dum lollipops. And so I want to provide some of these because I know that there are people here. There are both types of people. There are people with red hair and people with brown hair. So, for instance, I see someone here. What color hair would you say you have? You would say you have brown hair? Would you say red hair or brown hair? You wouldn't say either? You can't say okay, I don't know what to say. You're going to stick to your guns. Oh, you want to stick to that's clever. How about hair? Red hair? Okay, well, people with red hair, people with raspberry lollipops. That's the appropriate kind of lollipop. People with red hair. What color hair would you say that you have? Brown hair. And so watermelon lollipop, so that's the appropriate lollipop for people with brown hair.
What about people with no hair?
Well, maybe what color hair would you say you had? You can't remember that a long time ago. This may be an ageist practice that we have about lollipops. It might be. What color hair would you say you have? Blonde hair? No. It's brown hair or red hair. Those are the two choices. You have to check one of those boxes. Oh, you like brown hair? Yeah, of course. So you get a watermelon lollipop because that's what people with brown hair get. And you know, sir? You would say you have red hair. It's kind of a pale red hair. Yeah, so blue raspberry lollipops. Of course, that's the appropriate flavor. Do you have hair? Red hair or brown hair? Red hair. Of course you do. I take people's word for it. I don't question that answer. Do you have red hair or brown hair? Absolutely red hair. See, it doesn't look like it. It's kind of strange to think of that as red, but it's kind of a dark red. And off red hair. Hey, Michael, Hey, Michael. What color hair do you have? Brown hair. Okay, so we're just going to go with brown. Black or brown is not an option. There's only red or brown. Do you see how ridiculous this whole exercise is? Of course, there are more flavors of Dum Dum lollipops. And all of the flavors, both blue raspberry and watermelon, will be available for everybody as you leave. There's enough for everybody. I was struck by the silliest thing. Filling out an app for one of the local theaters. They wanted me to fill out an app so that they can send me all of the movies that I must see and advertise to me and tell me all of the concessions that I can get. And one of their questions was, what's your gender? Male, female, or prefer not to answer? Either you are in one of these boxes or you just choose not to share that with us. Isn't it silly? So on this day of transgender visibility, we are lifting up that there are more than 2 options for lollipops, there are more than 2 possible hair colors, and maybe there are more than 2 boxes we might check for gender identity. But we'll explore that a little more.
Our offering recipient this morning is Community of Hope, an interfaith nonprofit agency that reaches out to the youth of Northeast Ohio to create social connections in a family-like setting and to help these young people to grow and to develop. You may place your offering donation in the plate as it is passed during the service, or you can donate via Cash App. Our handle is $UUCC44122. Please give as generously as you can, but of course, within your means. Thank you.
For some reason, I always wait. I'm impressed with how this congregation does not just support this place, but also supports in a variety of organizations that give our values out in the larger community. So I can report to you today that for Literary Cleveland, not very long ago, we raised $350 to support their funds. One of the things they do is they help amplify the stories of historically marginalized people. And so the funds that we provide on Sunday morning help people that we will never meet out in the world to have their voices amplified and their identities be more visible. And so I invite you now to read with me the acceptance of gifts, which is on the yellow cue card. We offer these gifts with gratitude, and we acknowledge the constant gifts of time, talent, and treasure that strengthen and nourish this congregation as a reflection of our commitment to community within and without, our purposeful spirituality that is ever searching and growing, and our intentional actions that lead to greater justice in our congregation, our city, our nation, and our world.
Well, good morning. I'm not used to speaking this late in the service, but Randy had the dum-dums idea this morning, so. When I was a student, some years back, I was studying from the wild England. So I was there in the very late summertime in a beautiful part of sort of the countryside. It was a time of the year when you could see and find swans all over the place. Sort of usually in mating pairs together with their newly hatched young. You know, we have swans in America, but I've never seen so many, and so many sort of families of these swans around as there were in the UK when I was there. And here's a very funny thing I learned while I was there about swans in the UK, which is they got to be very careful around them, especially when they just had a brood of young swans, because they can be very aggressive and confrontational. Now, the reason why that's a problem is because legally, every single swan in the United Kingdom is the personal property of the Queen. I learned this from a British friend, I looked it up. It's true, it's from a 14th century law that still exists. So in the UK, it is the equivalent of a federal offense to do anything harmful to a swan, even in self-defense. I was blown away by that idea. The categorical ownership of something. I wonder what swans think about that. Especially suppose you're a swan not from England. Suppose they migrate, they're going about their business in the world, they end up in a stream somewhere on the island, and suddenly, without them having any control over it, they're now the property of the Queen. Aren't we amazing? We, us, people. We experience the world and immediately we organize it and categorize it. We use definitions of ownership. We even use legal protections, all to make sense of the world. You know, this is one of those huge concept ideas that is sometimes hard to grasp because it's also part of our everyday experience of the world. But this is an example of how we participate so often in the powers that run the world, even though it happens at such a small and insignificant level, including by altering our behavior around English swans because of our fear of what the Queen might do to us. That's an absurd example, of course, but it's absolutely how the world works. All of us work together in these ways we're not always aware of to define the world, to define how it works. And usually we're so confident about the way the world works and how we define what's in it, because deep down we all know that we help make it that way. What is all this stuff about swans to do with the Trans Day of Visibility, right? What does all this have to do with the experience of our family and our friends and our neighbors who are trans, who are non-binary, who are genderqueer? The swan issue actually ends up being very instructive, I swear, because it turns out swans are not as simple as the Queen even imagined them to be. In fact, for a long time in Europe, going back to even the Romans, when someone would refer to something that was imaginary but fake, they would refer to a black swan. Such a thing could be imagined, but the idea was that it certainly didn't exist, because no one had ever seen one before. And that idea lasted and was part of the English vernacular for a very long time, right up until Europeans learned that Australia existed, somewhere in the 16th century. And a Dutch traveler there described to Europeans that there was, in fact, in the world, a black swan. It had been there all along, living in the blind spot of an entire continent. Not only do black swans exist, they abound. And even though they are in the Commonwealth, it turns out they are far outside the Queen's control. Of course, people are people in the same way that swans are swans, which is to say that the categories that you and I have for them are completely inadequate for all of their wondrous variety, for all of their diversity of expression. A person should never have to ask permission for who they are, but we live in a world that hasn't learned the lesson that swans have to teach us. And so often the real, completely authentic, and indisputable experiences of trans people are cast aside by those who would rather not deal with a world that's more complicated than they wish it would be. The only honest and responsible response to learning about black swans is to completely reshape what we understand a swan to be. And the only honest and responsible response to learning about and knowing and caring for trans people is to reshape our conception of how we express our gender identities, to open ourselves with humility and care, to understand the lives that others are living. Of course, as our reflection before reminds us, for most of our trans friends and family and neighbors and peers, what they have received instead is a lifetime of ridicule, a lifetime of dismissed experiences. For some people, the only response they can manage after seeing a black swan for the first time is to scream in its face that it isn't a swan. For some people, being so sure about the correctness of their individual personal experience of the world, it grants them the audacity to insist that something, let alone someone, just shouldn't be what it is. And they have no difficulty imposing their understanding of the world upon those who don't fit into their way of seeing. I've said this before in this very venue, but I have long suspected that one of our UU principles is an especially powerful tool for reshaping the world we live in for the good, and that's our fourth principle. We all refer back to Chalice. This is the principle in which we commit to a free and responsible search for the truth. And I raise that and I believe in that. I see it as a powerful force for social change because I have a deep faith in the truth. I think the truth wins out because it just outlasts everything else. A black swan is going to perch in our reality in all of its blackness, in all of its swanliness, if that's a word. It's going to live there in that truth from peak to tail, and it's not going to apologize for what it is. In a similar way, I know that our trans family and friends are going to live out the truth of their own lives. And all we have to do to understand their experience is to care to listen and to learn. And that means that if we really obligate ourselves to search for the truth, it's going to mean that we as a community of searchers become a community of affirmers. Do we have the courage to be that kind of community? I hope so. Our trans, genderqueer, non-binary, our intersex friends and family, they need us to stand beside them to affirm that their lives and their experiences and their witnesses to who they are, that these are all truths spoken freely and responsibly. And if we seek to be truth tellers, it means taking those truths seriously and echoing them into the world.
Amen.
Amen indeed. Of course, we know that there are black swans in the world. And of course, we know that there are more than two options for gender, but it doesn't seem like that sometimes because there are people who proclaim a truth, who proclaim that something is a truth, even though we see evidence of something completely different. But sometimes we get a little confused by things. So I know that even in Unitarian Universalist circles, where we are very forward-thinking, we are very progressive-minded, we draw our circle very wide, we might still not understand exactly what we're talking about sometimes. When we talk about things like a Transgender Day of Visibility. So I'll just say that when we talk about transgender identity, we're not necessarily talking about biological sex. Biological sex is something different. Now, some people choose to transition in such a way that their biological reality matches their internal sense of gender, but their gender identity might not match the physical, biological reality that they're born with. And so when we talk about transgender, we are talking about people that may not have a sense of home that is the same way that we see them and make assumptions about them. And so we have Transgender Day of Visibility to lift up those people in a society that wants folks to fit into neat boxes, that wants to assume that there are no black swans and scream at the swans that they don't exist. But this is really not something that's brand new. Some of you have asked, why are there suddenly so many transgender people? How is this happening that all of a sudden there are transgender people and there weren't any before? I know that some of you have at least heard of Christine Jorgensen back in the 50s, a very famous person, a soldier, went off to World War II, came back and had gender-affirming surgeries. Wasn't called gender-affirming at the time, they called it different stuff, but Christine Jorgensen was rather photogenic, got on the cover of magazines and in papers, so she fit a depiction of what beauty looks like after her transition that made her very popular and famous. And maybe there are some people at the time that did not feel quite so safe. I'll just tell you, there were some people at the time that did not feel quite so safe being public about their identity. But it goes back even further than the 50s. There are societies, human societies, that have affirmed more than two genders for a long, long, long time. In Hawaii, long before Cook arrived in Hawaii, the Kanaka Maoli Indigenous Society had a multiple gender tradition, and the Mahu could be biologically male or biologically female, but they inhabited a gender role in that society that was somewhere between, that encompassed both the masculine and the feminine, and their social role was sacred. They were educators and they were celebrants of traditions and rituals. They had a special role in society. And of course, the arrival of the Europeans and the colonization of Hawaii nearly eliminated that native culture. And today the Mahu face discrimination in a culture dominated by white European ideology about gender. Two boxes, one or the other, right? In Samoa, the Fa'afafine are biological males who have a strong feminine gender orientation. And Samoan parents, because this is just a part of their society, Samoan parents can recognize this early in a child's life, and they can then raise them as this third gender. They don't say, oh no, we have to do something about this. They say, that's who my child is, and they raise them in a way that is appropriate to that child's identity. It's just part of their society. And Fa'afafine are not gay in Samoan culture. I know, we're in a Unitarian Universalist church, I'm going to say gay. They're not gay. They could be in romantic relationships with men or women or other Fa'afafine. Their sexuality is not the same as gender. Sexuality is a different thing. Gender is about where you feel at home within yourself. In Indonesia, there are 5 genders that are recognized in society. There are men, there are women, there are kalabai, kalalai, and bisu. And one of those is people who are born biologically male but have more of a feminine gender identity. And one of those is people who are born biologically female and have a more male identity. And the bisu are like a transcendent gender. They're somewhere in between and neither at the same time. They're their own thing. They fit in their own category. They have their own box to check. And bisu serve as special figures in society, sometimes equated with priests. On our continent, the indigenous people that inhabited this land before they were colonized have two-spirit traditions. We've heard about two-spirit. That means that they are a person who embodies both genders. And if you look at the Mojave, the Zuni, the Blackfoot, the Navajo, the Lakota, they all have this tradition of more than 2 genders, and this third gender is elevated, held as sacred, as special. That's a common theme when we look at societies that have multiple genders, that have a full spectrum. They honor people's identities as sacred. They lift them up. They don't say, you need to change this thing about yourself so that you fit in with the right boxes. They say, this is who you are. Okay, well, we will celebrate that then. That's not the way our society tends to deal with things. Thus, we have Transgender Day of Visibility. And I was going to mention all of these transgender people that have done amazing things, that are famous for one thing or another. And then I thought, actually, those people are already visible. The people who most need a Transgender Day of Visibility are the people like the names that Mark read earlier in the service. Those people who are invisible for other reasons too, because of their social class, because of something else about their identity, because they're people of color and also transgender. There are people in our society, there are people in our city that need to be more visible in order for us to celebrate their identities, to recognize them as sacred beings. And the reason that this is important, I know there are UUs here that are saying, well, wait, Randy, we're already a welcoming congregation. This is a safe place for transgender people. We don't need to hear this. We've already done this work. Well, first of all, there are transgender people in our city that may not think of a church as a safe place. So just because you have done a little bit of work does not mean that this is a well-known safe place for people who need to be visible. There are also, this year, 150 anti-transgender pieces of legislation that are working their way through our state. Not our state, our states collectively. Some of them are in Ohio, but 150 pieces of legislation that are oppressive toward transgender people. And these range from not allowing transgender people to compete in sports, to the so-called bathroom bills that prohibit people from going to the bathroom in public. And there are there are bills against providing the medical treatment that would affirm people's gender. These bills are deadly for transgender people and non-binary people of all ages, but especially they are targeting young people. So maybe we are welcoming, but are we doing all that we can to let people know that they are seen, that they are visible, that they are sacred, that they are seen and respected, not just seen and told that they need to do something to change because I see you and I don't like it, but seen, made visible, and lifted up for being sacred, which is why I love the song that the choir sang. Somebody being told you are a child of God. What does it mean to be a child of God? This is the audience participation part. What does it mean to be a child of God? I know some of you don't like that word. I didn't like the term child of God for a while either. But what do you think it might mean to be a child of God? That you're loved, that you're accepted, that you belong, maybe not even just accepted, but acceptable, that you are acceptable as you are. Somebody else. Sacred, that you're sacred. It might be another way of saying that you have inherent worth and dignity. That you're loved, that you're acceptable, that you're sacred. So how do we express that? How do we treat people as sacred, especially when their identities don't fit into the little boxes that our society has created for them? How do we let people know that they are visible and sacred? Making sure they have the same rights that everybody else has. Take them seriously. Accept them. Listen to them. Get to know them, yeah. You know, some of that may seem like a high bar for some of you. I will tell you, one way to help people know that they are visible is just to notice and compliment them. I walked out of a coffee shop the other day, and somebody, a stranger, said, "Oh, I love your nails." Made my morning. This person said, "I see you, and I celebrate this thing that I know about you. I don't know much about you, but this one thing that I can see about you, I'm going to celebrate you with that." It opens a door. There are some other things that we can do. We can speak out based on our values, because some of us are able to do that in a way that transgender people do not feel safe doing. There are people in this room that have privilege to be able to speak out in a way that is safe. And when you recognize your privilege, you recognize your power in other people's lives. I know privilege, it sometimes seems like this shameful thing. We talk about privilege and it's like, oh no, don't tell me about it. I don't want to know about my privilege. That's something that I'm supposed to carry around like a burden. But when you recognize and own your privilege, you recognize your power to change things. It's important. You can speak up at local government gatherings, at your city council meetings, at school board meetings. You could run for school board if you wanted to. There's a lot of stuff that happens at the local government level that affects people's lives. If you want a little bit of training on this, sidewithlove.org has a spokesperson training on March 31st, coming up on Transgender Day of Visibility. It's something you can sign up for. But a lot of you already know how to do this. It's just being courageous and speaking out based on your values. Because if trans people are not free, then none of us are free. And that includes the people who are persecuting them. Because people do not come up with anti-trans legislation because they are whole, free human beings. They are imprisoned by their own fear, by their own hatred, maybe by something about themselves that they're wrestling with. Who knows? But they are not free. So if trans people are not free, none of us are free. If trans people are not held up as sacred, none of us are really embracing our sacred identities. We have the potential to co-create a society that honors people's identities, that does all the things you talked about, to create a place where there's at least a lot more boxes to check on that spectrum, if we can't eliminate the boxes altogether. And it starts here, with how we co-create community together, how we welcome people, how we listen, how we get to know people, how we respect and honor one another's sacred identities, as well as everyone else who might come to those doors. We have the courage to do so. Amen. And blessed be. We're going to sing together, and you're going to need the book for this one. It's going to be in the teal hymn moment. When our heart is in a holy place. Number 1008. I invite you to rise and embody your spirit as we sing together. Our regathering team is going to meet again this week, and so we may be having some updates to our pandemic precautions. For now, I hope that you will stick around after the service to visit with one another. There's no coffee, but there are some really amazing people. So hopefully we will hold those people that you can chat with in high regard. And I invite you to read our COVID covenant that is on the yellow pew cards. In beloved community, we welcome everyone, absolutely everyone, into this space of worship and fellowship. In this time of pandemic, we covenant to respect one another by considering the safety and comfort of others before ourselves, to respect the policies our leadership has established, and to take all of our steps with one another with grace and understanding as we work to make this a truly safe place for all people. May we truly make this if not a safe place, at least a brave place for everyone who might enter into community with us, and may we lift up one another's sacred identities with full confidence of our own. Whatever it means to you, you are a child of God. You are sacred. You are worthy. You are accepted. Go with peace and courage.
Let us read together the words for the extinguishing of our chalice for this morning service. Together, we extinguish this flame as not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. We carry it in our hearts until we are together again.
Today's postlude is I Lift My Voice by Andrea Ramsey, and are in the order of service. And when we get there, I'd like to invite you to sing along with us.
When I lift my voice, let it be in song, defiant note in the face of wrong. I won't stand alone, we'll stand side by side, 'cause we know that love is always justified. When they try to divide us, if they hold it right us, I lift my voice. When I lift my voice, let it be for good. Let me care as much as I know I should. I will stand alone, we'll stand side by side, 'cause we know that love is always justified. When they try to divide us, it will only unite us. When I lift my voice, let it be in song, a defiant note in the face of wrong. I won't stand alone, we'll stand side by side, 'cause we know that love is always justified. When they try to divide us, it will only unite us. I lift my voice.
So, Alan, have you ever heard of